I would like to call tonight's meeting of the City of Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Give me just a moment.
No worries. We're dealing with some technical difficulties. So if folks would just bear with us for 1 second. Excellent.
Is that our name?
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Present.
Councilmember Dabala,
Present.
Councilmember Gibson,
Here.
Councilmember Siemens,
Present.
Councilmember Honzak,
Present.
Councilmember Small.
In the place to be.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for meeting with us today. There are a couple of quick agenda updates. First, we've had to have a scheduling change. We were expecting to have a presentation from the county on their mapping segregation project, but that unfortunately had to be postponed, and we will be working with the county to reschedule that event or that presentation. We have also added a resolution to the agenda providing, appointing signing authority to our upcoming acting Deputy City Manager, Mr. Eubanks. So that is something else that has been added to the agenda. So one item that we have for tonight is a proclamation because it is Women's History Month. So I am excited to be able to read my first proclamation for Women's History Month as mayor. Yay. And a woman. All right, so the City of Tacoma Park Mayoral Proclamation proclaiming March as Women's History Month. Whereas women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our communities in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. And whereas in shattering glass ceilings, overcoming discrimination, harassment, and hardship, women have been bold and fearless, widening the circle of opportunities for women and girls and creating stronger, healthier communities. And whereas women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social roles in every sphere of life in our communities. And whereas women have served as leaders in the forefront of every major progressive social change movement, not only in securing their rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in abolitionist movement and the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements which create a more fair and just society for all. And whereas women have served our country courageously in the military and were particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions. And whereas far too often women's heroic efforts and their stories have gone untold, especially those of millions of Black women, immigrant women, Indigenous women, and others from diverse communities. And whereas this year's theme, Celebrating Women Who Tell Our Stories, recognizes women past and present who have been active in all forms of media, storytelling, and art to communicate the lessons of those who came before us, pursuing truth and reflecting society decade after decade, strengthening our connection with each other. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Women's History Month in the City of Tacoma Park, and I urge all residents to join me in this special observance celebrating the contributions that women have given to society throughout history. Proclaim this first day of March 2023. Wonderful.
Do we have to, point of order, I just wondered do we have to aye or vote or anything when we do one of those?
Proclamations?
Yeah, because I'd say yay.
Well, that counts. Well, that counts.
Yay. All right.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Smalls, for supporting the proclamation on Women's History Month. Next, we will have our legislative update. Do we have our lobbyist Ann Seacott available? Wonderful.
Evening, everybody.
Good
Um,
evening.
Speaking to you on the other side of halfway through the legislative session. And for some updates on some of our priority issues. First and foremost, the good news is unlawful restrictive covenants, which wasn't a priority going in, but was a bill that the city council decided to weigh in on. Is in the process of passing the House, which is fabulous. I don't know why it won't also pass the Senate. We never say never, but it's looking very positive for that bill. Another bill that we are working on is the Safe Roads Bill about pedestrian safety. And that bill had really good hearings and was really well received. And I've been in conversation with some key members of the committees. And what I'm told is they're kind of working on it. So I think there's still some things to be worked out, perhaps with SHA. And I think I'm finding with a lot of bills, there is a lot of time being spent, I think, trying to work with the new people in the administrations across the board. So I've been told, kind of like, hang on, we're working on it. So I will be keeping very close tabs on it. And, if we need to do anything, in terms of generating any, grassroots response, I'll let you know ASAP. On ranked choice voting, I'm hearing there's not good news on that. I have heard that there's a concern both in terms of those who aren't thrilled with ranked choice voting, that if these are members of the legislature, members of the committee, that if there's a concern from the people that don't like ranked choice voting, that they don't necessarily want to make it easier for municipalities, for example, to go that direction. And then I've also heard they're concerned about setting a precedent for doing something for a municipality, for the municipality's voting process, election process, and then are they inviting all the municipalities or any municipality that might have a different kind of process and expect to be accommodated in that? So it doesn't look good for the bill for this year. So I think that this might be something to revisit if we need to. There's a timing issue, which is why the bill's been introduced. So I think we'll just have to keep plugging away at this issue. And I know that I got a question about cannabis reform. Because there is some revenue that is in the bill is proposed to go to municipalities. I am hearing that there's not talk. So it's almost like you're not hearing, but you're hearing that there isn't talk about taking that away, taking that out of the bill. The House is going to it has been working on the bill, and it's on a voting list for either tomorrow or Friday. So I think we'll know for sure what the House will decide on it. And I think any changes the House make, I don't think it's going to be rubber stamped by the Senate, but I think that there will just be some tweaks on the Senate side. And then there are, quite a number of environmental related bills. We've weighed in on a couple that just haven't come up for a vote yet. And I know Councilmember Dabala has asked me to look into a few more, which I will do. And then there was also a question about a stop sign bill that Delegate Charkoudian had introduced. And I thought it was a fascinating hearing because Her bill does two things. It requires cameras on stop signs for people that run the stop signs. And then it also calls for a graduated fine system. And I would say a good 95% of that hearing was about the graduated fine system, not about whether or not cameras on stop signs are good. So that was a really interesting hearing. I don't think it's going forward this year, but I think it's a very interesting discussion that'll likely come back. So that's where we are with those updates.
I guess.
Wonderful. Councilmember Small.
Hi, Ann. I just wanted to tell you, hang in there. You know, you look like you are chasing people around in the halls, which is probably what you're doing. So hang in there.
Good job.
And I just wanted again to express my sincere thanks to you for helping to facilitate my relative ease of testimony on the restrictive covenant bills on both sides. I'd anticipate that if the House is going to pass it and expand it, that the Senate will, because I had a much more difficult time on the House side than I did the Senate side, even though the bill sponsor on the Senate side wasn't even there. So, yay, that makes me really happy. And thank you for your work and any sort of unfortunate things that you have to deal with by my consternation. I apologize.
There's no need to apologize. And you're reminding me that I neglected to say, because it was just a couple of days ago, that the mayor did testify on Delegate Wilkins' just cause eviction legislation and did a good job despite the chair of that committee not at all hiding the fact that he hates that bill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And part of the issue is the fact that it is Tacoma Park. He's also not a big fan of
Not a
us
big fan of
as a
Tacoma
community, so.
You didn't like us before. He probably. It's not a good idea to be wrong about the fact.
Yeah, no.
That's all I'm saying.
It's perfectly fine. I mean, I think, Mark Elridge and I tried to highlight the greatness that is Tacoma Park, even though he walked out of the room, so to speak. Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. And out of the list of the environmentally related bills that I sent you, the one that I hear has the most attention and is the most likely to move, and is the most worthy of Tacoma Park support is HB 904, the Energy Savings Act. That's the one that if you had to, because you do look like prioritizing would be useful. Let's go with that one. Thank you.
Great. We'll do.
Yes.
Real quick.
Yes, so so there's quite a number, a large number of climate related bills that make tweaks to the big bill that got passed last year, or add a couple of details or a related provision. The Energy Savings Act, which has hearings this week on the Senate and the House side both, strengthens a program that the state requires utilities to do, the Empower program, to reduce and to produce energy savings. That's not right. To offer customers the energy saving programs and provisions to, so if they want to, they can do. So this sets actual targets. So it doesn't make anybody do anything, but it says, but after you get done asking everybody, you need to have a 2% reduction.
It's not just buy this extra nice.
Right, it's like, and it has to work, and it has to work not just on the energy savings side, but on the greenhouse gas emissions side, which translate for those of us, more electricity, more renewably provided electricity, less gas.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much, Ann, and I want to echo Councilmember Small's sentiment in your support of just getting me acclimated while in Annapolis, just logistics in terms of where to park and things like that.
Finding where to go. That's an important part.
It's an important part, and I appreciate you for that. I sent my comments on the bill chart to you separately. Have we heard anything about, there were a number of condominium related bills that were tapped to, try to help condo communities that may be experiencing things like, stormwater management issues and the like. Um, has any movement on those happened? And it's okay if you're like, I haven't had time to look into those, but.
So one of them that you flagged that creates a fund to try to help the condos, that is not moving. And I think that it probably won't. There is one moving that that's on the chart, and I've got an email ready to go in follow up to it to you on the clean energy equipment. It is moving on the House side, I want to say. And and I think the Senate bill is the hearing is next week. So I was going to be following up with you on that one to see if there's a desire to weigh in on the Senate side. There are a whole bunch of condominium bills, and so I think if there is whether it's city staff or someone on the council who has some expertise in that area to really kind of help figure out, are there a couple that are really priorities that would help the city, help residents of the city, then, it'll help because there's probably 10 or so of them. And I don't know which, obviously one that creates a fund to help the associations. I think that one's obvious, but with the other ones, I'm not sure. There's one about, putting stuff on a website. Do we care?
Yeah, some of them
that
are
kind
more
of thing.
governance, like how the condo board itself governs.
Mhm.
Like or I know I'm really interested in making sure that, because what I've heard from so many of our condo communities is the fact that the infrastructure that they have is aging in the city, or if they have, so it creates this challenge of when there are these massive upgrades that need to happen, or stormwater improvements and the like, it can result in thousands of dollars for each of the individual condo owners to pay. And that then creates a snowball effect where they don't have enough money necessarily to, in one shot in the arm, a $5,000 special assessment, or your condo fees go up to $1,500 a month because they have to make these massive improvements in their buildings, and there aren't really clear funding sources that are available to them that would normally be available to, say, a single family homeowner. You would have these different financing opportunities, or if you're a rental property, you may have these different opportunities available to you. But for condo communities, they kind of fit in this weird middle space of where those resources may not be available to them. And so that's for me, where I've been looking at some of the bills from the perspective of whether or not it would provide some additional funding opportunities for condo communities that are facing these kind of catastrophic building improvements that are needed, because we've seen in places like Florida what happens when you forego those types of improvements for too long. You can end up with some catastrophic event with your building. So that's what I'm thinking about, but we could definitely follow up. I'm looking at David in the audience. Follow up with our HCD staff and see whether or not there's some bills that might make sense for us to really focus in on.
I also,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, and I was just going to say that on the day that inadvertently that I testified in on the House side, that the bill that they probably should move was one of the ones that they did that day. And so far as it did sort of try to acknowledge the structural problems of some of the pre-existing realities of the way condo associations were developed in Maryland, in particular in Prince George's County, because most of those places are theoretically autonomous with regard to their all of the physical infrastructure. We had a lot of arguments back and forth between the county and the condo association about who was responsible for fixing the bus turnaround and things like that. And so it is a real issue over there. And, you know, some of it is historical legacies, and some of it is that eventually, if you put people in the financial situation that you're talking about, then those associations crumble,
Mhm.
and then there's nobody making those decisions in the first place.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the only thing I was going to add, Mayor, what you were just saying reminded me of another bill that's on the chart that is about creating a fund for extreme weather mitigation.
Mhm.
And the Maryland Association of Counties came in on that bill saying support it and allow all kinds of homes and buildings to be included in terms of eligible for funding, including condos, because they weren't in the bill. And the sponsors on both sides were fine with that. That bill was really well received and hasn't moved. And I think it's just because it sets up a multi-million-dollar fund. And they're probably waiting to see if either something like that happens without legislation, you know, waiting for the new administration to perhaps do something like that, or they're just waiting till a little bit later in session until they have a better idea of the budget, and could they at least start this kind of program with a little bit of money. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Thank you.
That's a great answer.
Okay. I don't see any more lights. So thank you so much, Anne. I appreciate all of your hard work, and we're almost there.
We're gonna get there. It'll be all right.
All right, awesome. Have a good evening.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Okay. I actually forgot to read the agenda. I focused on changes to the agenda for today, but wanted to make sure that I had a chance to go through the upcoming agenda. So just really quickly on this evening, we have a couple of items. We have a voting session regarding the first reading ordinance approving installation of traffic calming on Second Avenue. We also have a consent agenda that will be voted on, and that's regarding our boards and committees, a resolution providing for appointments of the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs, or COLTA, and a resolution providing for appointments to the Nuclear-Free Tacoma Park Committee. Additionally, as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we have another late add, and that is a resolution designating an acting city manager for the city of Tacoma Park. So we'll talk about that. And then followed by a work session on the proposed temporary street closures for events on Laurel Avenue and Ann Street, as well as FY 2023 Budget Amendment Number 5. On Wednesday, March the 8th, the council will be meeting to vote on the second reading ordinance approving installation of the traffic calming on Second Avenue, as well as the first reading ordinance approving FY 2023 Budget Amendment Number 5. We also will have a consent agenda, resolutions approving temporary street closures, and that is related to Laurel Avenue and Ann Street, that we'll talk about tonight. A work session regarding tentatively regarding the procurement of police in-car video cameras, as well as a discussion on council priorities. And then on Wednesday, March the 15th, we will tentatively be discussing the minor master plan preliminary recommendations, and that's tentative. That's if we confirm with our county partners that we'll be ready, as well as voting sessions on the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2023 Budget Amendment Number 5, as well as a tentative single reading ordinance authorizing procurement of police in-car video cameras. And we will continue our discussion in the work session on council priorities. And then on Wednesday, March the 22nd, we will tentatively are slated to have a youth council update, as well as presentations on the police department annual report, the library project update, and tentatively slated for the Balancing Act introduction, and that's the community budgeting tool, as well as a voting session on a resolution adopting council priorities. Just as a reminder, on March the 25th, the council will not meet. I'm sorry, 29th. I'm sorry, I saw April 5th and I just saw 5. Wednesday, March the 29th, the council will not meet. The council will also not meet on April the 5th. That is when Passover begins. Yes.
I just wanted to remind you about the Ethics Commissioner swearing in, and I'm,
Thank you, and I apologize, I forgot that too. So we also have on the agenda to swear in our Ethics Commissioner. Just want to make sure I have the actual information that I'm supposed to swear these people in. Nope, you gave it to me, and I have it right here. Yep, I got it. So, should we proceed with doing this swearing in before we go into voting, public comments?
if we can, that would be great. So,
Wonderful.
Mr. Sandberg, you can turn your camera on if possible. There you are. Okay, and Mayor Searcy will read the oath, and you'll repeat after her, and so on.
Great. Well, welcome, and thank you so much for joining our Ethics Commission.
Thank you.
All right, so if you wouldn't mind just repeating after me. Or you have to raise your hand, too. All right. I state your name,
I, Mark Sandberg,
do swear or affirm
do affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and that I will
and that I will
be faithful and bear
Be
true
faithful.
allegiance
be faithful and bear true allegiance
to the state of Maryland
to the state of Maryland
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of Ethics Commissioner
execute the office of Ethics Commissioner
for the city of Tacoma Park
for the city of Tacoma Park
in the state of Maryland,
and the state of Maryland,
according to the Constitution
according to the Constitution
and laws of this state
and laws of the state,
and the charter
and the charter
and code
and code
of the city of Tacoma Park.
of the city of Tacoma Park.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for agreeing to serve the city of Tacoma Park.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
Wonderful. So now I have to look to my handler. So I am signing this one and then providing it to you. Excellent. All right, so the goal is to get this out of my hand as quickly as possible. Thank you so much. Excellent. So now we can move on to public comments on voting items. So do we have any public comments on voting items tonight? Okay. Any on the line? Nope. Okay. Do we have general public comments?
Is that on?
Yes,
There we go.
gotcha.
Just wanted to take a minute, well, at least less than 3 minutes. Wanted to thank both council members Cindy and Kara for responding promptly to the questions that I asked last week. And I'm looking forward to playing with the online budget simulations tool that's going to be available in April, and hearing about the 10-year study of the financial health of our city presented by Raftellus Financial Consultants. I hope the city is able to identify the software needed to implement the interactive budget tool that's going to enable residents to have a real-time information on the budget. I think that's really important. The target is FY24, and I'm hoping it happens before we have to do our next budget. It's a very transparent way of doing work. I also want to thank Councilman members Randy and Cindy and our state rep Lorig for lending a hand in creating our first food forest at Tacoma Park Elementary School. This is the first of many that the Tacoma Park Food Forest Group is hoping to create within our community. These projects directly respond to climate change emergency and to the racial equity commitment that our city has made. The response to the creation of the food forest has been really incredible. It goes across the divides of race, age, cultures. Families came to lend a hand in the creation of this project. It was really exciting. We had over 25, 30 people there, stayed in the snow and everything else to be able to get all that lasagna gardening together. This is one of the incredible ways to build our community, to cross those divides that we're all trying to do. We all sit around in all our groups and say, how do we cross this divide? Well, climate change is an emergency. It's something that we all have to be working together, and we have to pull it together as a whole community. And there is nothing better than watching children and families. There was people there 7, and there were people there that were 70. And we worked for the entire day and got an incredible amount done. And there's still a lot of land left in Tacoma Park that we have to get taken care of. So we're working on that. So I hope to see you all out there in your garden clothes. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments? Okay, great. So we're going to move on to council comments. Let me turn this off. All right, Councilmember Gibson.
Thank you, Karen. It was fun being out in the sleet and in the sunshine, and I found out in terms of the Food Forest Project, which was held at Tacoma Park Elementary School, spearheaded by, I believe it's the elementary school's garden club plus the Food Forest Group of Tacoma Park, but some 20 cubic feet of compost and wood chips were moved to prepare the soil, and the group has received a grant, $1,500, to start this project, which is building the soil, but also to provide teachers with seeds and curriculum for the kids to learn more how to plant, what the food forest can do for our environment and for each other. And so there's more to come, more planting to take place. It was a fun time. I was glad to be a part of it. At 7 to 70, how about 73? I was there.
Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to echo a couple of sentiments about Women's History Month, and as the end of Black History Month arrives, just impress upon everyone how you were doing double duty in that regard, and also making sure that everyone knows that there are upcoming events in both the decision-making of the Purple Line and some unfortunate things about where they are going to put the barriers back in. I encourage residents who are affected by the issue to get with their appropriate community associations or myself, so we could talk about what else we're going to do to unfortunately irritate state actors. Additionally, I just wanted to impress upon everyone that as we move into the budget cycle and season, as we're slightly behind, that it is important to note that there are a lot of things that are going on and internal complexities within this fair city that we are going to have to talk about while we are doing the budget, and that we should be able to be civil and not unfortunately judge the competency of people who make the effort to try to provide some stewardship for the government of this fine place. Thank you.
Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to tell all those people who like to play or exercise, or scuba dive, or kayak, or just generally mess around in the swimming pool at Piney Branch Elementary School. That the boiler, to replace the boiler that broke, the new boiler has arrived and is about halfway installed. And that's as of today. We are hopeful that the pool will reopen again soon. So stand by for more updates.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to add one postscript to Councilmember Gibson's wonderful summary of the Food Forest Day and Karen Elrich's, which is just to thank the city staff for trucking out the wood chips. Talk about participation all around. Just pointing that out. That's it for me. I mean, great events. You're going to talk about Lee Jordan.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Mayor, real quick before you get to Lee Jordan, because that's positive. I also wanted to say that if you're a person who is a purveyor of local news, there's a wonderful story about the Purple Line and Prince George's County's efforts to spend a great deal of money all the way along the Purple Line until they get to right around where the University Avenue part is. Which could be because of the multi-jurisdictions, could be because of any number of things, but it is up to date if you want to read about the massive efforts that other people are putting into such a wonderful proposed project.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Just wanted to make sure that people are aware of the Youth Council Forum that's happening next week, 5:30 p.m. at Tacoma Park Middle School, and that's put together by the Youth Council that advises us here at the City Council. And I'm really excited, and even if you're not, necessarily a youth, I still think it's really great if you can come out and support them in putting together a town hall, which I don't know if they've done that before, and so it's very cool. Also next week, happening in Silver Spring, is Taking Nature Black, which is a really cool conference that talks about the intersection of being Black and being environmentalist. Really excited. I finally am putting it in my schedule this year. It's been going on at least since before the pandemic, and I really wanted to go to that conference. So finally going to make it. And then also, I asked Jesse today about reserving a space for Ward 1 to get together and talk about the budget on the 23rd at 7 p.m. And that'll be, is that the Azalea Room? Is that right? Yes. Yeah, and that'll be in the Azalea Room. I haven't exactly figured out what the format is yet. I'm hoping that it'll be more of a discussion and less of one person, putting out information to everybody. I envision a discussion, not just one person talking and giving out information. So hopefully everybody can join me from Ward 1. And if you're not from Ward 1, but you'd still like to get together and talk about the budget, we would love to have you there.
What was the date for this youth council?
It's 5:30 p.m. And you should have an invitation in your
Yeah.
Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick little note was that I just have a lot of gratitude, but wanted to let people know too what's happening at Erie and Flower. I was invited out to see one of our open business spaces in the Erie Flower Strip between Kennebec and Erie that's been largely vacant except for one or two shops for a really long time, several years. It was neat to see the coffee shop that's coming in is well underway. They're looking, I think, for about 1 month from now, could be 2 months from now, but soon. And while I was there, I also got to meet the owner of the new hair salon that it has already been completely constructed. It's beautiful inside. They're working on some licensing issues, and I learned that the owner of that business, who I hadn't met yet, lives right across the street from me on Kennebec. It's a Black woman-owned business, and she's really excited about opening her new business. And we're also going to be getting a dog groomer, apparently, but I have yet to meet that business owner. So I'm very excited that the entire strip is actually going to be full of shops in the near future. This is great news for Ward 5. Now we just have to work a little bit harder on the northern section of our ward. And then I just want to reiterate again, the March 13th community public safety meeting. I hope we can get as many Ward 5 residents there as possible. People have not been able to meet in community much during the pandemic, and I hope this will be another event where we can come together and really start working on some community ideas that are concrete about next steps following the last meeting that we had about public safety. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Karen, for coming out. I was not able to participate in the prep work for the food forest. I had a meeting conflict at that time, but the next time I'm ready to scrub in. Hopefully there will be no sleet, but I will be ready to scrub in at the next one. So this weekend was lots of really fun events. On Friday was already mentioned. I was able to go to Annapolis to testify on Delegate Wilkins' Just Cause bill, so survived that one. And on Sunday, there was a series of really great things. I was able to meet with a Girl Scout troop, the Daisies, to talk about what it is like to be the mayor. I was asked lots of very profound questions, like what I do and what I like to eat and what's my favorite fruit. They were mango. And so to have a chance to meet with a number of 5.5 and 6-year-olds to just talk about what it is like to be the mayor was great. Also had an opportunity today, actually, to participate in a panel at the Washington Adventist University on excellence in Black culture. And so it was a number of students and faculty that were just discussing how to advance Black culture, keys to success, and what are some things that we as a Black community are charged with doing to advance the culture in the nation. So that was a great panel. I enjoyed it so much. The students were amazing. And so definitely wanted to give out a shout out to the Washington Adventist University student-driven panel discussion. Also on Sunday, this room was packed, like it was packed with people who saw the Lee Jordan film. They call him Mr. Lee. And I mean, I stood in the back because this room was so full of people who knew Mr. Lee, family of Mr. Lee was here, and were able to just really share all of the wonderful things that he was able to do for the community, but really importantly, to encourage and lead the charge for others in our community to take up the mantle that Mr. Lee left behind in terms of volunteerism and really engaging the youth and coming up with youth programs and activities for a number of students and a number of kids in our community. So it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful event. The movie was amazing. I want to thank Historic Tacoma for putting together such a wonderful event. They have asked if you, particularly because this is part of a series of additional films that they're putting together. So if you have some old photos, particularly around, in the Black community, if you have old photos of the city of Tacoma Park and back in the day that you're willing to participate in some of the work that they're doing or continuing to do, please, please, please reach out to Historic Tacoma. I think that what the film that we saw on Sunday shows is that there's an important story to tell, particularly as it relates to the Black community in the city of Tacoma Park and the value the contributions that so many people of color in our community have made. And so if you have that information, if you have those pictures, if you have those stories or those histories that you want to share with Historic Tacoma, I want to encourage people to do that. And that is all I have. I will turn things back over to Councilmember Fulcher.
Mayor, could I just ask a question about
Sure.
what you just said?
Sure.
Do you know if the film is going to be available for others to watch it around town?
Next week. It's going to be on YouTube.
Oh, okay, I did not catch that. Thank you.
And one thing that is amazing is they're in conversations as well with Montgomery County School District and some of the social studies teachers to really try to allow those teachers to use the film in the classroom. So it's just really, really amazing what they're doing and what they're advancing. Councilmember Fulcher?
Hi, Jesse just updated me that the Youth Council Town Hall has actually been postponed. So I'll bring a date when we have one.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's move on to our next agenda item. So we are going to move into any city manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor Cersei. Yes, I do just have a couple of things. I wanted a chance to state publicly the answers to the questions that were posed last week by Ms. Elrich regarding some of the financial initiatives from the city. So the 10-year financial forecast is underway. We have contracted with a company named Raftellus Financial Consultants, and we will need to schedule that for a council meeting. We expect it to happen late March, if possible. The second item was the interactive online budget tool that is slowed by difficulty identifying a software that's compatible with our current financial software, and that includes all the functions we need, especially the CIP budget, which is an essential part of the city's financial health and activity, and that is affordable. So that was originally slated for FY24. We will keep you posted as we make progress on that. And thirdly, the Balancing Act, I am sorry to say it looks like it's going to be delayed.
Okay.
And so we will follow up with that. It's an educational simulation tool that it requires a lot of staff input on data to build it out. Balancing Act is a company that actually does the back end piece of it, but our finance staff has to provide and organize and categorize. It's a heavy lift, and we're not sure that we can have that in time for this budget cycle.
Thank you.
Additionally, we wanted to give council a brief update on the library. I was going to turn it over to David Eubanks.
Really quickly, before we switch gears, are there any questions about the finance update that we just received?
Hi, Roz. I just had one statement to you guys that if you're going through those kinds of things, I had to do that before. So if you have any thoughts or anything else, I did go through the whole procurement process of looking through a bunch of them. So I'm happy to help if you need it.
Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, thank you. Not trying to second guess staff load, but I would really love to see the budget tool be available for this year, and I'd be interested what maybe council can say don't do in order to get that in line, because I understand there's a limited number of finance people, but I also think if we miss this window, then we're waiting a whole year.
Just to clarify, you mean specifically the simulation, the educational simulation
and then
tool?
And then I did have a question about the other budget tool, which was, I assume then that means we might need to spend more money if we're going to do that, and are we off by tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands? I'm just curious.
It's premature.
To say.
To give a
Okay.
number. We will be coming back to council
okay.
as we get clarification on
That's what
what's
I thought.
possible and what the gap is. And
Okay, thank you.
what an alternative recommendation might be.
And just to kind of pick up Councilmember DeBala's point, I think that the Balancing Act software, while helpful, in my view, the priority is making sure that we are able to present to the council and to the public our 10-year forecast information. I think that, I think that if we are really trying to make sure that we're able to balance our time and how we're kind of getting the information that we need to get together for the purpose of the budget, in my view, the 10-year finance forecast is important. I think the Balancing Act, while very useful, perhaps would not be as useful as that forecast, right? So if because keeping in mind we have a limited number of finance staff, and we have like all of these different projects that are needing to be delayed, in my view, making sure that they're able to support the consultant then and presenting to council around that 10-year forecast before we get those budget rates, to me, is really important. And then, we can work, in my view, we can work around getting resident feedback if we're delayed a little bit and we're not meeting the ideal timeline for the Balancing Act. So again, ideally, I would like to see both happen, but if I had to pick, I want that forecast. So I don't know if you have any.
I was, just to clarify, we are on track for the financial forecast to be presented to council prior to the budget discussions starting in April.
Perfect. And just as a reminder, the Balancing Act data would be pre-populated with the FY23 budget, right? Not what we're planning necessarily.
So what we're working on is FY23 budget numbers that are, it's essentially estimated for FY24. So we are building in some cost of living and wage increases, the ECI rate. So it's not just FY23 numbers, it's an estimate of the FY24 budget. There isn't time to put the FY24 budget, final budget numbers in.
Right.
Prior to launching. So we've tried to come up with something that's as close an approximation as we can reasonably get to.
Okay.
But again, I can't. Last week when I drafted the answer to the questions, it looked more promising. This week, I'm not at all clear that we're going to hit it in time for this budget cycle.
Yeah. Councilmember Gibson?
Yeah, I want to follow up, I guess, with without having some of these technological tools, the interactive and the Balancing Act. I'm new to the budget process here, so I don't know how we've done it, but we have to have a mechanism, whether it's the website, whether it's graphic presentations, whether it's discussions, we have to have ways to communicate with us as well as the residents in clear ways. I mean, there's all kinds of questions about how does ARPA fit into this? And that gets confusing. So if we're putting or delaying some of the fancier technological tools, my assumption is that we're going to come up with something in its place, some way of communicating with the public about those issues, even if it isn't going to be as sophisticated as we would like. I hope that's the case.
Just to remind my colleagues, so we are required to have 2 public hearings as it relates to the budget. And we also will have a number of additional sessions during the month of April around the budget. I think that if what we're looking for is to have more personal one-on-one conversations with residents. Council members in the past have done that in a number of ways. For example, as Councilmember Fulcher mentioned, having a ward-specific meeting, having ward-specific Zoom calls to get that feedback from your residents around the budget, working in partnership with some of your residents once the budget is made available. There's a number of different mechanisms that we can leverage individually, but also look for ways collectively to get feedback if we're not able to get the to get the Balancing Act tool up and running in time.
If I might just respond, yeah, that makes sense. We do need to do all of the above. I'm just, in terms of how we frame the information, I shouldn't be framing it different than Cindy does, or Kara. It needs to be framed by our financial staff in consultation with us so that it's clear what the choices are that we have, and what, that it be framed in a way, not verbally, but graphically, and that we can use that when we're interacting with our constituents. So.
Yep. Acting City, okay. Councilmember Honzak?
I just wanted, again, I'm newer, Councilmember DeBala. I just want to make sure I understood what you just asked for and why. I just understood you to say that between the interactive online budget tool and the Balancing Act, it would be your preference that the Balancing Act comes out sooner or is prioritized. Can I understand why that would be? Because it sounds to me like more of a theoretical educational tool, and perhaps the way I've understood it in the past presentation that we were given, a little bit less practical in terms of the numbers that we might be dealing with right now. Educational, yes, but why did you feel like that would be the priority now, if I could understand better? Thank you.
So I thought that I heard that there's no way that the interactive budgeting tool is going to be available because it's going to cost more money than we thought. So then, but then we heard last week that both of the other tools would be ready. And so I was saying, is it possible, what would we not need to do if we were going to be able to get that budget Balancing Act ready in time to be useful this budget cycle? So it was more of a question of a practical question of how much can the staff do and what can give. I agree with the mayor that the 10-year forecast is the first thing.
Yeah.
But I thought I heard that was basically ready to roll. So
Yeah.
I
was just trying to understand
Yeah,
between
good
those two.
question.
I guess it's interesting that that's what you heard between those two, interactive budget and the Balancing Act. I guess what I heard was that the Balancing Act was going to take an extraordinary amount of staff time, which I perceive we don't necessarily have right now. So one might be financial resources, one might be Balancing Act, but I thought you might have some historical perspective there that I wasn't clear on, and other people might have questions about who are watching. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Recognizing that the previous council supported using the software, I still have racial and equity concerns that I would like to understand, that whoever we would go with has some proof that a diverse group of people tends to use it when this software type stuff is used in other cities, because I have no doubts that certain parts of the community are going to tell us how they feel about the budget, and my concern is finding a way to hear from other people.
Okay. Councilmember Small?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would just like to say again, Roz, that one of the few standing things, besides buildings, that's over there in that other place from when a long time ago, is that the ClearGov profile that I helped to build over there still exists, and that particular tool, I would be curious to know about what the procurement process was for the digital tool, because there are tools that are really, really easy to use that you basically just give them your Excel spreadsheets and they give you amazing things. So if you wanted to go, if anybody randomly wanted to go to ClearGov and look at what Capitol Heights used to do back in the day, you could find it, and it's very thorough for $2,000 a year. So I don't know what's going on over here sometimes.
Okay, thank you so much. And so turning things back over to Acting City Manager, we're going to move to the library update, correct?
Yes. And we have David Eubanks to give us an update.
Oh,
Are you
turn me
on?
Hold on one second, it's my
Wait.
fault. Turn you on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. All right, thank you, Ross. Mayor, good evening. Council, good evening. Members of the public. Just wanted to give a very brief update on the library. There will be a more comprehensive update in the March newsletter, which will be issued very soon. There's also a more in-depth update on the city website. But generally, we continue to make progress, incremental progress in the absence of permits. As you all are aware, our permit struggles have been for quite a few months now. And most of that, if not all of it, is exclusively a result of a very long queue with the Department of Permitting Services. We got a lot of movement from them, I guess in early January, February. But one of the outcomes was that we needed to work with PEPCO across the street because of a very mild floodplain increase. And so we need to get a letter from them. And so we're working through the process of getting a letter from PEPCO now. They have all the information that they need to review, and we should be hearing back from them very, very soon. That is one of the very last steps that we'll need to take before DPS has everything they need to release the permits. After that, there's, as I said before, a cascading effect of the remaining approvals and permits, and everything else is queued up. So we had to return some documents to some of the other parties that are also going to give us approvals. All of those documents that we had to submit are kind of just waiting for this DPS permit to be released. So in the meantime, we've done just about everything else we can do. So since we started construction, since we hired the contractor, we have, of course, moved the library to 7505 New Hampshire Avenue. The solar panels have been moved from the library's rooftop. The library mosaic has been stored. Of course, the partitions between the community center and the library have been erected. Just recently, within the last week or so, the interior demolition has been completed and any hazardous materials have been removed from the media center and the library itself. And the utilities have been disconnected. So we are just pending the permits which will allow us to take down the building. Fingers crossed, we're shooting for the end of March, early April for construction demo to start, but of course that's kind of pending the review process from DPS and others. As a last update, we have just, as of today, moved the mailbox that is in the community center parking lot off of Philadelphia from its position between the library and the community center effectively to the basketball courts. So it's available, it'll be in that location until the end of construction. And then if that is not the permanent location, we'll find another site at the community center to have it exist. And that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you very much. Councilmember Honzat.
I just wondered if you could share with us how the delay with the permits is affecting the arrangements that we've made to use the other site for the library. How, are we set up for a fair amount of flexibility on the other space that we're using for the library, and to what degree is that affecting our timeline and the contracts we've got in place?
Yeah, for the temporary space, we have a lease for 3 years, and the duration of construction from when construction begins is 18 months. So there's a decent window built in. The original intent was the purpose of the longer term lease was to also be able to accommodate any displacement as a result of the atrium infill project. Of course, we haven't started that, and so if we do have to relocate staff for a period of time, that may be reason to increase the lease term. But in terms of the library itself, we're covered. I think your other question was about the impact to the timeline generally of the library redevelopment. The delay is 1-for-1. So every day that we haven't started is added time to the back end of the project. So still 18-month construction time, but from the time we actually start. So I think that means right now we're talking, if my math is right, September of 2024, I think is about 18 months. Any other questions?
Councilmember Fulcher?
Is starting the atrium project contingent on being at any sort of phase in the library project, or are they just completely separate?
No, very much intertwined, mostly because the amount of space that we have to allow contractors space enough to do their work, to lay down materials for contractors to park, also to accommodate all of the city functions that will still continue, is limited. And so it is not likely that the two projects will be able to be underway simultaneously. So we'll need to wrap up, at least substantially wrap up, the library redevelopment before we start the atrium infill.
Sorry.
Councilmember Honzak?
Yes, so, sorry, I guess these are questions from new council, if we don't know. And the atrium project, if you could remind us, is scheduled for how much time approximately based on estimates?
I don't know offhand, but we
Okay.
can get you the info. I want to say 12 months, but I'm recalling from conversations a while ago.
So just so I'm understanding correctly, if I understood what you just said to my first question, the original vision was that the 18-month timeline of the library would be put together with approximately a 12-month-ish timeline for the atrium, and together it was envisioned that that 3-year lease on the temporary space was going to allow us to do both projects potentially, and that funding for the temporary lease, if you can also remind me, comes from ARPA funding, or is it from our general?
It's a part of the library funds, so the total cost of the library project includes the 3-year lease.
Okay, so if
And
we
that-
still
and-
do the atrium project, we would presumably need to find some other funding then for
For the lease?
for a temporary lease, because we would need
Right.
for the library not to go into the space yet until the atrium was done.
No,
No,
I'm sorry.
no.
No, so the library can be relocated whenever the library staff
but-
and the functions at the temporary location
Okay.
can be relocated as soon as the library is finished.
Yeah, but then, I'm sorry, then the folks who are in the atrium now that need to be moved out and have different office space would be moved
They
into
would
that
then
space
take the
potentially.
temporary space, right?
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And I think to answer your question, yes, if we go beyond or need to go beyond that 3-year term, then we would need to find additional funds
Okay.
to cover the additional term of.
So we are
additional
rubbing up against the edge of the
We're getting
original vision
close.
of that funding, which is probably a fair amount of money. I'm just sort of laying that out, right? I mean, I mean, I know you don't know the exact number, but that's like 2.5 years-ish together, the two projects could have taken, and we're well into the, right, 12 months plus 18?
We're getting
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
If we start in the projected timeline.
Yeah.
If we go much beyond that, then there may be some concerns. I'll
Okay.
add, though, that we do have soft cost contingency built into the budget for circumstances like this. And that amount is $170,000 if my recollection serves me. And so that could be available. There's also hard cost contingency. I think that we will probably utilize most of that contingency. That's typically how construction projects of this magnitude go. So we
Yeah.
may.
Is there-
It's really hard to say.
Is there anything that we as council could do to help, maybe our mayor's already done some things, I don't know, any letters that could be written to help move Pepco along, saying this has got pretty massive implications for our city budget, and we're not really pleased about that? Could you move a little faster, or?
Yeah, I don't.
Any thoughts on that?
No issues with Pepco. They have
Oh,
been
okay.
they've been very helpful. It's a large organization, and finding the right person to sign a document is a bit of a challenge. But Pepco has been great.
Okay.
I think most of the delay we've already worked through, and council has been helpful in that regard. So now it's just we're kind of at we've exhausted all options. We've done all we can do. And now it really just is, we're down to the fine strokes, and we just have to let the process play out.
Okay. All
But I
right.
appreciate the offer.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Honzek asked my question, who do I need to email? So once we, I know that Councilmember Stewart was helpful. I emailed her once about some permit hangups. And so that kind of got us over that. We started
did.
getting a little bit of traction.
Yeah.
So if we are finding ourselves in a situation where we need to ping a couple of friends in the county council to get this thing moving again, just unleash the Kraken. Just let us know, and I'm happy to ping some of our colleagues on the county council to inquire about the status of our permits.
Sounds good.
Thank you. All right. Okay, seeing no more lights. Next on the agenda is the adoption of minutes from January the 11th and January the 18th. City Clerk, do we have any changes or adjustments to the minutes?
I did receive some comments that are incorporated, will be incorporated into the minutes.
Okay.
So I mean, I think as long as council, as long as you are comfortable with adopting them with your suggestions.
Yeah, my just for the good of council, the edits I sent forward were just edit, like grammar kind of things, nothing substantial. Just friendly edits. Councilmember Honzak?
I move to adopt the minutes.
Excellent. All right. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, so we have moved forward the adoption of the minutes. Now we're going to go to voting session. So the first on the agenda is the first reading ordinance approving installation of traffic calming on 2nd Avenue. We've seen and discussed this item during the last council meeting. Would anyone like to move the ordinance approving the installation of traffic calming on the 6500 block of 2nd Avenue?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second, and may I make a comment?
Sure. Let's get your mic.
Yep. I just want to say that the process for approving or for petitioning for a sidewalk was done properly. It followed the process, and with the support received from residents, and assuming that it is passed, I just was wondering if I could get an idea, approximate idea in terms of the time for installation, but maybe I'm getting ahead of the vote.
Okay.
We'll get a response.
I think, yeah, we will get a response from the Director of Public Works, Daryl
Thank you.
Braithwaite, for you.
Thank you.
Correct. All right, so just for the city clerk, just want to make sure you caught that. Councilmember Smalls moved, Councilmember Honzak second.
Yes.
And given that this is a first reading ordinance,
Actually, Councilmember Gibson seconded.
was it Gibson?
No, I didn't second.
You didn't second?
I did not second.
Okay,
No,
Gibson.
I do have a question though.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You were going to, okay. All right, excellent. Because I wanted to make sure I had that straight too. All right, Councilmember Honzak.
I have a perhaps a silly but technical question as I was reading the ordinance. Maybe it will be something I'll learn for the future. It's on section 1 of the ordinance. I'm looking at, let's see, how can I refer everybody to here? Under the 3 whereas, now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, that section 1. And here it says installation of bump outs as traffic calming, and then it proceeds to describe the speed hump. Is
that's an
that,
extra
is
thing.
that a typo, or is that?
That is a typo.
Okay,
That is a
okay, I
typo,
thought maybe there
yes.
was some sort of technological term that I was not familiar with. Okay, thank
I'm
you.
really happy about that.
Thanks.
Okay. And so we can make sure that that correction is made when we vote on the second reading ordinance of this ordinance. Okay?
I have one thing, Mayor.
Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to be specific about the fact that notwithstanding my non-participation in the discussion last week, I did drive down Second Avenue, and I have sort of examined it even in the context of rush hour on a Friday. And I am completely comfortable allowing for this speed bump to happen. However, the fact that we have a system that allows for exigent circumstances such as what are going on in Ward 6 with regard to cut-through traffic and anything else, where the staff is hamstrung in making those kinds of decisions for public safety, I find sort of appalling, and I also can't believe it's been like this for this long.
Okay. All right. So just a voice vote. Okay. So Councilmember Small moved, Councilmember Gibson second. We have one friendly amendment in section 1 to replace bump outs with speed humps. All those in favor of moving forward with this
Point of order, Mayor.
ordinance?
I'm sorry. Can we just strike bump outs altogether instead of with regard to that language? I'd just like to be clear that we're only putting a speed bump in. Thank you.
Yes. It would be replacing bump outs with speed hump. All right. All those in favor of the ordinance approving the installation of traffic calming on the 6500 block of Second Avenue, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain?
Actually, Mayor, I'd like to change my vote to abstain.
Okay. So we have 6 ayes, 1 abstain. All right. Thank you. Okay, next we're moving on to the consent agenda. And so in the consent agenda, we are voting on some additional appointments to a resolution providing appointments to the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs, COLTA, as well as a resolution providing for appointments to the Nuclear Free Tacoma Park Committee. So because this is a consent agenda item, it's voted in one motion without discussion unless a council member requests removal of an item for an individual discussion. So would someone like to move the consent agenda for?
I move.
I'll second that.
Okay. Councilmember Gibson moves, Councilmember Small second. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. All right, so that moves forward. Thank you so much. All right, so next, and this is a late add to the agenda, we have a resolution. We have had the pleasure of Roz Grisby has been acting as the deputy city manager, as well as Director Greg Clark has been acting as deputy city managers for quite some time now. And they have been serving in a temporary capacity as a detailed opportunity for them. But the period for their review is, their term is nearing an end. And so we have had an opportunity to meet with senior leadership and have them interview with the council around taking over the role of deputy city manager. And ultimately, because of where we are with our city manager search, serve as the acting city manager. And so we have had the pleasure of having David Eubanks, who we've heard from earlier today, who will be serving as acting deputy city manager and as a result, acting city manager for signing purposes effective on Monday. And so with that, I just want to read this for the group. Whereas the City of Tacoma Park Charter and Code envisioned the role of city manager being occupied, and whereas the former city manager resigned on February 13th, 2023, and the city manager position is vacant, and whereas council is tasked with ensuring the city manager's duties and responsibilities are fulfilled, and whereas it is necessary and desirable to clarify roles and responsibilities within city government, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of Tacoma Park, Maryland hereby appoint David Eubanks as the acting city manager for the City of Tacoma Park, and be it therefore resolved that this resolution is to be construed as vesting the full responsibility, authority, and duties of the city manager position in Mr. Eubanks until such time as it is rescinded and or superseded by future action of council.
I would like to move that.
I would like to second that joint.
Excellent. Well, Councilmember Siemens moves, Councilmember Small second. All those in favor of moving forward the resolution?
Can we have a discussion on that for a second? Like technically by definition, you don't mind, do you?
Yep, Councilmember Small.
Thank you. I hate to add extra time to a municipal government meeting because I know how the staff is in municipal government meetings, but I just wanted to say that it has been a wonderful experience working with both Greg and Roz in the positions that they were drafted into. Whether or not it was linearly correct with regard to what the charter said or anything like that, you guys served admirably. And I'm really excited about the prospect of David Eubanks coming into this position and helping to solidify some of the things that have been going on with regard to staffing and other stuff, and allowing for both Roz and Greg to go back to their babies. And so I just wanted to say I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you dealing with the circumstances. And it's not easy to be scrutinized by everyone, and it is always appreciated by me.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to echo Councilmember Small's appreciation for Ms. Grigsby and Director Clark for the time they've put in and work that they've done on moving the city forward during the past several months. And I would also just like to voice my strong support for Mr. Eubanks, and I'm confident that he brings solid skills to the city manager position to carry us through this transition. Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, what they said. I can't thank the two of you, Roz and Greg, enough for filling in on short term, which became a lot longer short term, which became an even longer short term. And you both have wonderful departments to go back to and a lot to do there, and I really appreciate it. So, and I also have a great deal of confidence in Director Eubanks and in stepping into what is a challenging situation. And mostly, I'm also really impressed with the way that the senior leadership team as a whole has risen to the occasion and pulled together to share the load, whether it's who's got the title or whatever. I think that's just so impressive, and I really appreciate it. This may not be the time to ask the mayor a question.
Sorry, I'm getting past pieces of paper.
Yes.
Sorry.
I was wondering if there was anything you wanted to say in general about the process going forward with the search for a new city manager.
Sure.
Since this is, just to emphasize, this is a temporary situation.
I don't think we voted yet.
No, we haven't.
No, we haven't.
Well, it might be a temporary situation.
So, sorry, between getting the piece of paper and listening and switching topics. But I do want to express this council's commitment to identifying and being transparent in the process in terms of moving forward with the selection process for a new city manager. We have been definitely gathering as much information as we can around the steps that we'll need to take to get a search firm together and think through what our process would be for community engagement in particular. So there will be more to come in terms of next steps. But I will say that we're also actively looking for an interim city manager as well, so that we can do our due diligence in terms of the recruitment process for our permanent city manager selection and give ourselves some time to do that. All of that said, I do want to echo all of my colleagues' sentiments in that we have such amazing staff here. Roz and Greg have done a tremendous amount of work in the last few months in support of the city and in support of in the acting deputy city manager role. And so they're not going anywhere. I know it sounds like you're leaving, but no, it's just really just amazing. Kudos to you and to Greg for all of the wonderful work that you all have been doing in the acting deputy city manager role, and definitely look forward to you being able to go back to your first love. But we also will continue to look forward to working with you and with Greg and your returning roles. And then with that, David, we're just super excited that you've agreed to take on this role in an acting capacity. I have full confidence in your ability to do the job, and look forward to working with you in this new capacity. It's been a pleasure as the HCD director. So with that, we still need to vote, y'all. So between the piece of paper that I got and all this other stuff. Excellent, thank you. All right. So with that, so just so that everyone knows, we've already read through the resolution. Councilmember Siemens moved, Councilmember Small second. Clerk, do we need to do a roll call on this one or no? No. Okay. All those in favor of the resolution designating an acting city manager for the city of Tacoma Park to Mr. David Eubanks, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, wonderful. Thank you all so much, and thank you so much, Mr. Eubanks, and look forward to working with you effective on Monday in this new role.
When's the party?
Which part?
I don't know, which one?
It depends on when you're hosting it.
Exactly. All right. So the next items on the agenda, we are working on a work session. The proposed temporary street closures for events on Laurel Avenue and Ann Street. So with that, I'll turn things over to acting city manager Grisby.
And Mr. Eubanks, are you presenting on this?
Nope, it looks like Ira's here.
Ira's online, okay, there you go. So I introduce Ira Keller, our Economic Development Manager for this topic.
Excellent. So we'll turn things over to Ira.
Thanks much, Roz.
Looks like we're dealing with some. Looks like we're dealing with some Wi-Fi issues. Okay, so Ira, I think you're freezing. Okay, we're gonna.
You guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, give me 1 second. I apologize for that. All right, new room, new background. You all can hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, Mayor, members of council. As Ross said, Ira Keller, Economic Development Manager for the City of Tacoma Park. I'm here tonight to present our resolution on temporary street closures for 2023 events. This is a resolution that we take to council hopefully annually every year, where we kind of cover all of the events that will be requiring street closures for the year on city-owned streets or city-managed streets. Excuse me. So you see in front of you a resolution that includes closures for 12 separate days. Most of these closures are for, I believe 9 of them are for the DC bound lane of Laurel Avenue next to the Streetery. And then 1 is for Ann Street, and the rest are for the area by the junction by Grant Avenue. Several of these are for kind of ongoing events that have been hosted in the city for several years, including the Tacoma Park Street Festival, Tacoma Flea, and the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Spring Fest. There's also a few new events or growing events that we're really excited to support with these closures, including the Market at the Bank, which will be hosting 2 events in April. These are an outgrowth of the Tacoma Collective's work with their Market at the Bank event in December in the Old Tacoma Business Association area, as well as the Crossroads Food Fair, which was an inaugural event sponsored last year by the Crossroads Food Network, which allowed several of their kitchen vendors to participate in food sales out on the Streetery, and was a tremendously successful event. We're really excited to have that again this year. So just to kind of briefly discuss the process here, this resolution, the passage of this resolution would allow the city to close city streets for these events. Just as a reminder, this only applies to city-managed streets, so state highways are closed by the state, obviously, and require a separate application process. So this just speaks to the closures that involve city streets. I also wanted to touch very briefly, and I apologize, I'm going to pull up the dates here real quick. Moving rooms there got me a little befuddled, but you also see on there 2 dates, March 29th and April 15th, that are marked as temporary traffic count closure dates. These 2 closures would be closures for 1-day closures of the the DC bound lane of Laurel Avenue between Carroll and Eastern, again, what we traditionally call the Streetery. And that would allow the city to conduct traffic counts on those days. We've been kind of discussing the future of the Streetery. I believe we've kind of discussed it here in council. And part of that is really getting some data to understand the impact of both the current temporary closure of the northbound lane of Laurel Avenue, as well as understanding the impacts of potential other closures of the southbound lane. So these 2 1-day closures would, again, allow the Tacoma Park Police Department to set up a portable traffic counter and be able to count some traffic on days when that road is closed. As you can see, we've selected both a weekday and a weekend, and we can then compare those numbers to counts that are collected on days when that road is open. So this is not a full traffic study. This is kind of just a temporary traffic count to give us a little bit of data. We definitely recognize the need for a larger traffic study to get even more data, and we are actively exploring grant opportunities, funding opportunities to enable us to do that. But in the interim, this allows us to kind of get some more data on how traffic is impacted by road conditions and by potential closures there. So I will pause there and open it up for any questions. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Councilmember Gibson.
Thanks, Ira. A couple of questions. You noted that this 2-day closures for traffic counting is obviously not a full study, but later you'll do a fuller study. I guess the question is, why the duplication? Why don't we wait to do a fuller study? How does this fit into the various the OTBA's planning process? I just save money and do it a bigger study later on, or it's needed at this point to do just a quick 2-day study?
Sure. So as you just pointed out, OTBA does have a private contract currently to work with a consultant on some design work around the Streetery area. As part of that design work, they held a few stakeholder conversations, both with residents, with business owners, with a few other stakeholder groups. And I believe some of the feedback that came out of that was kind of the importance and ability to gather some additional data. And so as part of that, we kind of offered to see if we could do some of these limited counts right now. Again, understanding that this will not give us the full data picture and kind of the full traffic study, which would require some additional external funding. But this is something we can offer, and a few counts we can offer that don't cost us any money here, and get a little bit of data for the moment. Again, while we actively work to find some funding for larger traffic studies.
Great. So it sounds like this is something that the city offered to move things along, but it in no way means a green light to any particular option for that area. Is that correct?
It's certainly not. And again, we as I mentioned, we're kind of hopeful of being able to secure grant funding to do additional traffic studies and additional engagement that would come with any sort of broader proposal.
Great. And as we've discussed separately, I mean, there are lots of different opinions, and there's a great deal of interest, particularly in the areas immediately around Laurel Avenue, to have an additional stay. Actually, that brings me to when I look at the environmental considerations, one of the things which perhaps could be mentioned there is that there's traffic and safety impacts when you reroute traffic. I guess debatably could be called environment, it could be called safety, but certainly the safety of the streets where traffic would be diverted is something worth considering. I guess I'd suggest that you might want to look at the language there in environmental impact considerations, to think of it broadly, if you would consider traffic flow and related safety issues there. So thank you. Yeah, that answers my questions. We look forward to getting some data, and then for getting an opportunity for the folks in that area, well, and the city, but particularly those most impacted, to have a say in what's going to happen. Thank you.
Councilmember Honzak.
Just a quick piece of input for you. I'm not sure if you didn't have people on staff that might have kids in the school system. I'm noticing that the 3/29 date and the 4/15 date that you've selected are both, well, one of them is definitively in a spring break period. The other one is very much on the cusp. So DC schools are closed between April 15th and the 21st. Yeah, so that date I would not recommend for sure. It's just a total anomaly. And then 3/29 is awfully close to the Maryland, Montgomery County. I'm not even sure about PG. No, I guess PG. I don't know what PG County schools are. They're different. Anybody know PG? I didn't look that up just now. But definitely, you just might want to revisit those two dates and consider resetting them. I think it was one of my great frustrations back when they did some traffic. I know this is not a full-on traffic study, but when they did this down by the TPES school years ago, and they did it when things were under construction, and I thought, my goodness, like, let's pick a different set of dates that are more representative. I just, even changing 1 week out either direction would get better data.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that feedback.
Yeah.
We'll review the calendars. The resolution does give us the ability to potentially adjust some of these dates. Within the city
Definitely the
manager's office.
4/15 one. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ira. One quick question that I have is, so there are, particularly in the spring and in the summer, you have like the farmer's market, the Crossroads Farmers Market that comes into season, that requires the closure of Ann Street on Wednesdays. That typically, those closures come to us under a separate correct, okay, a separate resolution.
Correct, yes.
And there's a separate one also for the farmer's market in Old Town, correct? So do we close the street for that? I feel like we do.
We currently do not. That is operated on a private parking
That's
lot.
in the parking lot. Okay. I'm just trying to remember whether or not, okay.
Yes, I believe in the past we did close the Laurel Avenue.
Or Avenue for it,
but not
but
currently,
not
yes.
now. Okay. And so just to, just as a way of kind of making sure of the timing of when the Crossroads Food Network, the farmer's market, have we already approved that street closure? That's likely going to come to us later.
I will have to check in with you on that. I believe it's there's some sort of continuing resolution that was passed, but I'll confirm and we'll get you an appropriate resolution if needed.
Yeah, as Mr. Keller said, I believe the council, I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure the council authorized a continuing closure of
Approval.
Ann Street for the Crossroads Market.
Perfect. Thank you. So, okay, that's really helpful. And thank you all for refreshing my memory because I barely know my name at this point. And I look forward to attending a number of these awesome events that are planned. So, definitely thank you, Ira, for presenting this, to us, and, definitely look forward to attending some of the fun events.
Well,
And-
thank you for bearing with me.
Councilmember Fulcher, I think I have one more light.
I'm impressed that you're being sort of like innovative and trying to do your own traffic study, like your own traffic study light. Because I know that the traffic studies are hard to get financed and get approved from the higher beings that are not Tacoma Park. And so I'm really interested to read about, you know, how you guys go about doing your traffic study, your counts. And I would also be interested at some other time when there isn't everybody listening, hearing, you know, how you decided to do this and, you know, and what the procedure was to do it. Because maybe there are other ways to use your informal traffic study to make some other traffic studies happen in the rest of Tacoma Park.
Sure, and just to add a quick piece of clarification here. So again, I just want to emphasize this is not like a traffic study necessarily. Really, all we're able to do here with these days is get some very simple traffic counts, right? That we're not going to necessarily be doing any kind of design or engineering work around that, right? This just enables us to get some data that can inform some future traffic studies and future work as well. So don't want to
Maybe encourage traffic studies that we haven't been able to get done. Yeah. So.
Certainly, yeah, and give us also some good data that we can go in for some grant applications and other work as well.
If I might, and the traffic count will be, do you have have you determined the placement of those counters or whatever you call them?
Sure. So we are still coordinating that. Currently, the police department only has one portable counter. So for these particular counts, unless we find some outside assistance, we'd have to identify one single location. But we will certainly communicate that with you as we identify that.
So just one location, okay.
All right, seeing no more lights, thank you so much. And this will come back to us for vote next week, I believe. Thank you so much, Mr. Keller. Have a good one. Okay. All right, so next item on the agenda is the FY 2023 Budget Amendment number 5.
Should we take 5?
Oh, you know what? I apologize. I totally forgot my 9 p.m. rule. Just want to give folks a quick 10-minute break, and then we will reconvene. All right, thank you so much. right, we are going to reconvene after our 10-minute break. And next on the agenda, our last item for tonight, is the FY 2023 Budget Amendment number 5. For this discussion, am I turning things over to our Finance Director or acting?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'll take it. We are joined tonight by our Director of Finance, Susan Chung, who is going to walk us through Budget Amendment number 5. This is a different amendment than you saw a month ago as a work session, so we're starting from a clean slate. Susan, you want to take it from here?
Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor and also the council member. I am very pleased here to discuss the FY23 fifth budget amendment. And this is a revised budget amendment from the amendment that we presented a month ago. This one is more straightforward. It mainly involved the general fund. And it shows the bottom line here on the first page of the covering sheet is the general fund total has revenue increase in the amount of $227,078.81. And that number is coming from, first, from the general government revenue subtotal of the total of $273,000. And that is made up from the interest dividend revenue increase due to the bank interest rate adjustment. So the bank rate has been increased from 0.02% to almost 2.2%. So that's why there is a tremendous increase in the income revenue for the interest income. And that total is about $220,000 increase. The second item is the budget increase due to the market interest rate adjustment of the unused bond fund. And that is in the trust account that we have. Since we are not using the bond money, the bond council decided that we're earning the interest from the remaining balance, and we estimated the interest to be increased by $25,000. And the third item is actually for the tree revenue. That tree revenue is actually, we have an earned in interest account. It's called a tree fund. And that money is transferred from the tree fund account to the tree revenue account as the request by the Public Works Director. And that amount increase is $28,000. So the total government revenue increase is $273,000. We do have two increase in expenditure. One is from the general government for the legislative salary increase, which is about $17,921. Another expenditure increase is corresponding to the tree fund revenue. It's the $28,000 increase. The budget increase is due to the tree program. So the $28,000 revenue increase is matching with a subcontract expenditure in the public works. So it offsets each other. So the net total in our general fund revenue increase is $227,079. Okay. The next page is all in the special revenue fund. Special revenue fund works in a way that when we have, when we use the grant money, then we get reimbursed. So this is something that is always have a matching number between the revenue and expenditure. So the net, even though we have a grant fund, provided to us, we also use that money. So the net total is becoming zero. So we have projects, for example, like PAPCO grant, $10,000. We have grants from Kim Lam Maple Avenue Complete Street, and it's $304,000. We have the Maryland Art Grant A and Grant B. Each one of them The first one is $4,098. The second one is $7,530. And then the last grant that we receive is called State Police Grant for the license plate reader, and that is for $45,525. Since the revenue and expenditure match with each other, so the net increase is zero. So, so you can see from the total that actually the total budget amendment increase is the net revenue increase of $227.79. The next page is a more consolidated summary of what are the funds that affect the budget amendment this time, and this is mainly coming from the general fund. And we do have some environmental consideration and also the racial equity consideration for this budget amendment. The environmental consideration is coming from the PEPCO Sustainable Maryland Committee program. And also the racial equity consideration is mainly from the project with the Maple Avenue. So, so this is a summarized detail of our budget amendment 5th. And at the request of the mayor, I also prepared 2 worksheets to show the effect on our fiscal year 23 budget. How did the first budget amendment, the 2nd to 4th budget amendment, and also the 5th budget amendment affect our fund balance? And it is separated into 2 worksheets. The first one is called General Fund Fiscal Year 23 Budget, and General Fund Cumulative Budget Total with Amendment. So this particular worksheet is actually the data is retrieved from our adopted budget of fiscal year 23 of page 42. You can see that the total revenue amount on the first column under the adopted budget is $27,056,238. The total expenditure when we adopted this budget is $34,104,647. The bottom number is number in red, which is the difference between the total expenditure and also the total revenue. And I have color-coded the first budget amendment, the 2nd to 4, and also the 5th budget amendment in different color. The second row there shows the revenue increase, if there were any. The middle section there shows the expenditure increase. So the net difference at the bottom on each column is showing the net increase because of the original deficit when we adopted this budget. So for example, at the first budget amendment, our total expenditure increase is $2,163,282. And that amount added to the original $7 million deficit, that is bringing us to $9,211,691. That's how we get those numbers. So the budget amendment 2 to 4, you can see from the second footnote, the total budget amount for the budget amendment number 2 to 4 is $317,647, which include $141,540 for the police supervisor salary increase, $96,000 salary increase for the non-union staff, $80,000 salary increase for the union members. So all these 3 numbers added together is an increase of expenditure in the budget amendment 2 to 4, okay? And the total is $317,647. And now with our 5th budget amendment, since we have revenue increase, so that means our deficit number will be reduced by the revenue increase. So the net revenue, the net deficit after the fifth budget amendment, it will be $9,302,260. And this is the first page and is similar to the regular financial statement called income statement. The next page where I'm going to present is the fund balance, the funding source where our expenditure is going to show in how does it affect our ending fund balance. So the first section here, we can see we have different type of funding sources. The most familiar one that we usually know of is the unassigned reserve. The number is called projected unassigned reserve because this number, $4.9 million, is actually coming from page 44 of our fund summary in the adopted budget. Is in the middle section there. So you can see from the second to the last line, 4.922075, that's the number that I'm getting from for this adopted budget, because the number is as of June 30th, 2022. So this is the balance that we were projecting during the FY23 budget time, that we projecting our unassigned reserve to be $4.9 million, and that's the number that I put on this second worksheet, and this is our unassigned reserve balance. And then the middle section here you can see is called projected committed reserve. Projected committed reserve include a lot of different reserves that we are familiar with, especially the equipment replacement reserve. We have about $3.7 million at that time. And these are all projected numbers. These are not actual financial numbers, okay? So because our fiscal year 23 has not been closed yet, so these are all estimated numbers. So it could change once we close our book in fiscal year 23, okay? So there is an emergency reserve. The amount is $541,000. And there's a small amount, which is called WSSC contribution for street work. And this balance of $97,000 has been there for a long time, and it's mainly restricted for street work only. So it's usually used by our public works department. So it is reserved for them for street work only. And there's also the facility maintenance reserve, $227,000. The non-spendable prepay is mainly we have some prepaid items there that we usually purchase and put it in there. Okay, it's a small amount of $4,600. And also, we're familiar with the housing reserve. And right now, we projected them at $689,000. So all these emergency reserve to the housing reserve, the total projected committed reserve is $5.3 million. Okay. So we also have another reserve, which you may be familiar with. It's called the restricted bond reserve. That is the bond money that we have, we receive from the bond proceed, and we put it in the restricted account for the payment of our library construction. So we added the $4.9 million from the unassigned reserve, $5.3 million with the committed reserve. The restricted reserve bond fund is $6.2 million. So all these three reserves added together, our beginning of the year fund balance is $16,462,557. So you may be familiar with the $7 million deficit because of the projected expenditure higher than the expenditure, than the revenue. That's why we have this deficit in red, $7 million. So $7 million subtracted from the $16 million, we are expecting the ending fund balance to be $9.4 million. And that number matches exactly on the page 44, at the end of June 30th, 2023, we projected that number to be 9.4 million. And also it matched with page 42. You look at the column, the third to the last, to the right. The third column to the right is also $9.4 million. So these numbers are actually, we already know these are the numbers that is show up and is already show up in our FY23 adopted budget. So because of the first, second to four, and the fifth budget amendment, the deficit balance has been increasing slightly, okay? So at the end, we are looking into a total deficit, which is projected as well, of 9.3 million. And our fund balance at the end, it will be about $7.1 million. So this is what we expect. If we spend everything in the adopted budget and we receive everything from the revenue from the intergovernmental and also the property tax, that is the ending balance of our general fund balance at the end of the year of fiscal year 23. But the number could change because depending on how much we actually spent, it could be much higher. The fund balance could be much higher. If there are projects that we cannot complete or there's some delay of any projects we cannot finish by the day of June 30th, it would be the unused fund will be put back into our fund balance. Okay, so this is my presentation for this worksheet. So I'd like to know if you have any other questions for me.
Awesome. Well, first, thank you so much. I'm going to Council Member Small.
I would just like to say that this is so well done in comparison to what we had previously been trying to work with, even with the mathing and everything else. And I hope that if there are people who have been concerned about the ability to read through what our finances are to see what is going on, that they recognize the effort that the mayor and that Ms. Chung put in together to make this look amazing and normal.
Thank you. Thank you for the direction from the mayor, because I think this is mainly come from the mayor that we end up with this more clear presentation of actually what our fund balance should be.
Thank you. Kudos to you for spending lots of time trying to explain the reserves to me. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thank you. This is great to see so much of this in one place, and not just the general fund, but the bigger picture. I really appreciate that. Three things, and they are totally not related. One is concerning one of the grants, and I think it's just fabulous that we're getting $300,000 grants. I'd like to ask if we can have at some point in the next couple of weeks an update on how community participation will go in the next phase of the Maple Avenue project, because it seems to me, having been, not to steal your thunder, but having been in on the first phase and knowing the dangling questions, and some of them were pretty big, about what was the next step going to be. I'd like to make sure that we have a plan for doubling back on that. So not tonight, but I'd really like to hear that. The second one is to just ask a question about the tables. So the $28,000, thank you for putting that in there. Thank you to the council for approving the transfer of the money from the tree fund to the tree planting. My question on this table with all the reserves is, which one, if any of these reserves, has the tree fund money in it? Or are there still, because what I'm concerned is there's still other little pieces out there
Yeah, the tree fund is working differently from.
So it's just an oddball?
It
Okay.
is not coming out from the reserve. It's actually, we accumulated all the donations and all those money that we receive from the citizen and putting it in an account we call tree fund.
Right.
And it's unearned revenue because these are.
Oh, okay, so it
Yeah,
falls under
it's in the unearned revenue
Got it.
account. And every year, we typically, based on the need of the Public Works Department, we transfer $25,000 from the unearned revenue to our revenue. But if there is a need for more tree projects, the transfer could be higher. So like just this time, in the fifth budget amendment, the Public Works Director thinks that we need to have more money for the tree project, so we transfer another $28,000 from the unearned revenue to this revenue account to compensate the expenditure increase of the $28,000 from the subcontract account.
Right, and the reason I bring that up is because on the one hand, it's a transfer.
Yes.
From one fund of money that the city already has and isn't getting used.
Yes.
To spending it. Okay, that's a wash. But on this set of numbers, it looks like we're adding $28,000 to the city budget because it's not in any of these reserves, or am I
Yeah,
not right
it's
about
not in a reserve. We, in the city's financial statement, what we call the balance sheet account.
It'll show
We
up
have
there.
an asset
Okay.
account and we have a liability account.
Okay,
And
so
this
it'll show up
unearned
there.
revenue is coming from the liability account. It's not from our capital account, which is the reserve account.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, so in the, in the truly full picture, it'll show as a wash.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And this also doesn't, and it shouldn't, because it's a budget amendment, but it doesn't show the full ARPA money accounting and all of that either. But this is great. This is very clear. Thank you.
Thank
And my last question is about something that isn't here, that I asked about it a month ago. And so we had been given a chart showing salary savings from vacant positions, and I had asked to also see a chart of salary costs from the acting positions. And so I'm just re-upping that as something that we would like to see, because at some point that'll come home to us. We'll need to know how much of the vacant, sorry, I used the word savings, how much of the vacant position money got used for acting and other things that we need. So we'll need both. We don't need it tonight, but I just wanted to remind everybody that I had asked for that. Thank you.
Councilmember Dubala, I thought that the HR director had sent those numbers. I saw them.
I think there was I think it was more about the differential, but one of the things that we had talked about in terms of the rationale for not including the staff savings in this amendment is you don't really know for sure until you're a little closer to the end of your fiscal year, because we just really lifted, we're hiring, right? So it's a cleaner, and I'm not an accountant, okay? But it may be cleaner to really estimate an accurate account of what your salary savings may be once you're further along in nearing the end of the fiscal year, and then you're able to do that reconciliation, and then you're able to have a more full picture versus a portion of the fiscal year accounting, when you could have in your last quarter of the fiscal year an extra 5 people that increase. So it's not really a savings, so to speak. So so
hold off.
So I would say hold off,
Okay.
because it will give you a better indication of what your true staff salaries in terms of benefits, in terms of the salaries and the wages. You'll get a better accounting for that towards the end, closer to the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so I'm looking at it now, and we had gotten a table, and please do thank the HR director for all of this detailed work, but it had to do with the differential, the difference, not the whole, these are the full totals. not differences. And so at some point, we'll need to know what the differences are. But I see the point of if we're not amending the budget right now to account for all of this, then we don't need it right now. And there's plenty of other HR and finance work to do right now. So I take it back, but that, I don't want to forget about it.
She said that she was gonna do it.
She did,
also.
but-
Yeah,
but
because
we've
it just,
also
we
had-
just asked the wrong, like, we got the wrong number in the context of what we were looking for. So,
Okay.
like, you did totally remember that, right? That's 100% what happened.
Okay, all right, that's it, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember DeBala? I'm sorry, Councilmember Gibson, sorry.
So, I'm trying to remember what we had seen a month ago. So one of the things that was changed was to take out the salaries. Are there other things that were changed from that previous presentation? That just kind of to make it, to compare what else besides
Yeah,
salaries?
so there was also ARPA.
Yeah, some
Yes.
ARPA expenditure, and actually that is ARPA expenditure reduction, because those few items in the ARPA fund were projected, those projects would not be complete by fiscal year end. So that's why there was, on the last budget amendment presentation, there were a few items in the ARPA fund, and it shows us a budget reduction. So it's reducing the expenditure amount in the ARPA fund.
That's, yeah, so those are some big numbers, both the salary and the ARPA stuff. So, and we're obviously we'll need to have something, those numbers before us to make any kind of decisions about the next budget. And so is there a date that you're expecting to see those figures that include the salaries, the projected salary, either expenditure or gain, and ARPA and anything else that was not included?
I can speak to the ARPA question. Our understanding of what council was asking for was to look at ARPA as part of the budget in its entirety. And so we have scheduled one of your budget work sessions that is a specific focus on ARPA. I think it's the night you're also doing CIP. It's a specific focus on ARPA, and that will be the time to dig in deeply on what's happening this year, what's happening in the 5-year spending plan.
So that would, that's the April dates, I guess, the first 2 or 3 weeks in April
Yes.
or something like that.
And then usually as part of the budget process, so just kind of unveiling a little bit behind the curtain, staff are working right now on all of the work that they need to do in prep for the budget. And so a lot of the work that they're doing may be verifying and finalizing staffing numbers, looking at all of their projects with an eye for what are we feasibly going to be able to do and what we aren't going to be able to do. What are some things we can cut and what are some things we want to prioritize getting included in the budget. And so usually as part of that budget process, we will see at some point during the process, this is the reconciliation list of items that people we're not going to be able to hire. These are salary savings. Projects we're not going to be able to do. These are the things that we're not going to be able to complete in FY23 that we need to figure out, because there's going to be this money that may be available that we can put into the reserve, and we need to decide on what we're going to do with it. And so you all might have heard a lot of people talking about carryover, which is no such thing. But that's kind of what that process is, and it usually results in a final budget amendment, because we have to decide, yes, these items are not gonna move forward, we're gonna move this money into the FY23 budget. So that usually happens once staff has had an opportunity to kind of do a little bit more of the reconciliation of where we are in terms of what we can feasibly do, what we can't, where the savings are, where they're not. And then those are discussions that will happen as part of the budgeting process. So sometimes, like for example, when we were dealing with with COVID, right on the early stages of COVID, there were items that we weren't able to do as part of that prior fiscal year. And so council had a decision to make. Do we want to move that into the next fiscal year in the general fund, or do we want to try to do something related to COVID? We said, okay, let's figure out some quick way for us to get money out to businesses and people, right? So we'll be able to make some decisions around where those particular items fall and how much money is associated with it once a lot of this reconciliation work is done. Does that help? Is that helpful? It's not as clean as any of us would like, but yeah.
So rather than doing it now, doing part of it now.
Right.
We're just not going to do that part of it now. Look at the suggestion is to look at the ARPA money as a total package.
Yeah.
All 5 years and all the projects
Right,
that we
right.
have, or don't have, started, not started, rather than say these three aren't moving, let's subtract them now.
Well, two things come to mind. One is when I was talking about a framework, so of needing to communicate to us as well as we need a framework that puts this together, that's understandable, that's clear, for us to make decisions and for us to communicate with our residents. It also strikes me that decisions between now and the end of the year about what doesn't get done or what does get done it sets the stage for the problems or the opportunities that we have in the next budget. So if we're looking at some deficiencies or some potential, let's say, property tax increases because of various things, then we might want to help the staff make those decisions about what does or does not get funded now. So it's just we don't want, I think those are really important decisions that set the stage for where we're at to make our budget decisions. And I'm hoping that we're involved with staff in making those decisions. Am I clear?
Just to clarify, the staff is putting together now projected FY23 numbers. That is out of the approved council-directed budget of
Right.
FY23. Where do we think we'll land?
Right.
And proposed FY24 budget. So we're doing those two things simultaneously. And everything out of FY23 was approved by council in the budget and the amendments. So the direction we've had is go do what council approved for you to do.
Well, thank you. I guess I'm also remembering when the prior city manager tried to save money so that by freezing. And we decided that we didn't want to do that. So I'm just thinking that there may be opportunities to save money that we do want to do. Just saying,
Yep. And those, so those are the things that we talk about when we were talking about the budget, right? The 2024 budget, right? So it's important to keep in mind that from a cyclical perspective, the council, and we're going to be talking next week around our priorities, right? We established the priorities of where we want our community to focus and what we want to prioritize. Staff then take that as a directive in terms of how they want to make recommendations around what types of projects should be conducted. They then come before us and say, this is our best guess of what we want to do and how many people we need to do it and what kinds of opportunities we want to make available, how many sidewalks we want to do. It then becomes our job to say, thumbs up, thumbs down. Now, the question is, do we have enough information at the time to be able to make informed decisions around what's thumbs up, thumbs down? That's a different conversation around presentation for the FY24. But the purpose of the multiple meetings that we'll be having during the month of April, we're meeting in many cases 2 times a week, is to make sure that we have an ability to say yes and no to items in the budget. I like to remind people of what we ultimately did in the early stages of the pandemic, where the council instituted during the budget process a hiring freeze. The staff said, we need this number of people. We said, we don't know what is coming down the pike with this pandemic. We can budget for these people, but you cannot hire them until we say so. because we didn't know how much money we might need in order to support the community. So that was a decision that was made during the budgeting process. So as we are entering into the budget process, those are some of the decisions that we'll need to make. We can very easily say, here are the items that were in the FY23 budget that we were not able to get to. We could look at those items and say, all right, we don't want to do them. Take that money, put it in the reserve. We have the ability to do that. So I think that what's important for us is just making sure that, the budget cycle, it happens sometimes very fast, and there's a lot of meetings, and it's a lot of stuff that we need to make sure that we're digesting. I know the staff is really committed to trying to make sure that they're presenting the data and the information in a way that's easily digestible for people. But it is going to be, us too, making sure that we're asking the right questions, meeting with our residents, really scrubbing the budget with an eye for where are those potential cost savings. Councilmember Fulcher.
Director Chung, I'm sorry. I didn't quite catch on the general fund budget and funding source.
Yes.
Where is the loan for the library in this? Like which one of the?
It's in the projected restricted bond reserve.
Thank you.
This is the trust fund that we have put aside for the payment of the library construction project.
Okay.
So when we when we are starting the library construction, the first funding source would be this bond fund. After we exhausted the bond fund, our next funding source could be from the special revenue, the cable grant money, and we designated about $2.5 million from the special revenue fund. And also there was about $4 million in the ARPA fund, and it is also designated for the library construction in the FY23 budget. But those numbers are in the standard allowance, meaning that this money is, the treasury allow us to use $10 million for whatever need the city is purposeful. So this $4 million from the ARPA fund is designated for the purpose of the library construction to actually complete the project.
Okay. And then, so deficit here is just all of the spending, right?
Yeah, the deficit amount is actually the difference between the revenue that we have at the adopted budget time and also the expenditure at the adopted budget time. So these are all estimated numbers. As I said, we may not receive all the revenue, but we also may not spend all those money that we have put in the FY23 adopted budget. So the final actual financial will reflect the actual spending of the city once we close the book around October of 2023.
Okay. And then as far as any ARPA money that is going to be spent on the library, that's just not it. We just didn't do ARPA in this
This is
great.
Yes, this is mainly for general fund. So it's a snapshot of the general fund fund balance condition at this point. So the other funds, including the speed camera fund, the special revenue fund, stormwater fund, and the ARPA fund, they are not including in this snapshot.
So does that mean we also didn't include, if we didn't include those funds, we also didn't include those expenditures in this, right? So like anything that ARPA money would have been applied to or speed camera money would have been applied to, we just didn't include that.
We did not include that. But those funds are actually self-sufficient, meaning that the revenue that we receive is supposed to cover the expenditure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Chung. Again, I can't stress enough how appreciative I am that you have spent so much time working to clarify this. One of the things that I think is important for everyone to note on page 42, when we're talking about revenues for the purpose of the 27 million, a little over 27 million that's on the cumulative totals table, that we're really talking about taxes and utility fees, licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures, use of money and property, charges for service, intergovernmental and miscellaneous. It's basically all of the monies that we may be getting from other places. Now, the other funds, or the fund balance, includes the monies that we have squirreled away for one purpose or another. So it's like our loan, it's our equipment replacement reserve, it's the monies that we've been saving. So when we're talking about that deficit, it really is the revenues from the money that we're bringing in minus the expenditures of what's included in the budget. And because we have things like the library, right, which we have those expenditures there that are quite costly, or maybe this was a fiscal year in which we had to buy a big, I don't know, electric street sweeper. Those expenditures are included in that, in the budget. So we have money squirreled away to cover them, but if you're looking at the revenues in terms of how we're getting money in versus those expenditures, we're at a deficit, because we're not bringing in enough in our taxes to actually pay for the expenditures that are there. We planned for a lot of it. That's why we have the equipment replacement reserve fund, right? But it does, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a deficit. So when we are having conversations with folks around, hey, we're in a deficit. Okay, so what does that really mean? Is it that we should, as a community, start to save more monies in case we need to do things like a large infrastructure project so we don't have to borrow any money? Is it that we need to start saving more money or make sure that we're bringing in, diversify our revenues to make sure we're bringing in way more money than we actually need in order to make these expenditures? Like, those are some of the questions that we have to ask ourselves, and it would be great to get the community feedback about, because what we're doing with the reserves, all of the different reserves, is we're tapping into the money that we're squirreling away, and we're kind of becoming really reliant on them. And that's not necessarily a good thing. So I like to say, is it that the city can't keep the lights on right now? No, that's not the case. Could we maybe think about other revenue streams to bring in so that we have more money? Or could we set higher goals for ourselves in terms of our unassigned reserve so we have a larger rainy day fund? Definitely. One of the things that I was wanting to make sure I picked up on, Councilmember DiBala raised an important point, and I was kind of noodling over this too, is, you know, how when we look at the fund balance by funding source, and now is not the time to do it because there's just a lot of stuff that's moving, we didn't necessarily do a crosswalk between actual expenditures and then the actual committed reserve banks that they're tied to. That's a lot. But if you, we're not ready for that. It's just a lot extra work when we're trying to prepare the budget. But one thing that I would encourage people to keep in mind is, like, for example, with a lot of the budget amendments activities that kind of took us over a little bit, a lot of that came from like capital outlays, which we know would be a part of those reserves, or perhaps aspects of public works, again, which we know probably involves some sort of equipment purchase that would likely end up in our in those reserves. Now, those reserves are not going to necessarily account for staffing, salary increases, right? Those kinds of things are things that we're going to hope will wash out in the end in terms of our general fund amounts. But I do want to make sure that people feel a little bit better, even though we didn't do that itemized connection, that you can see just, on the surface that it's pretty clear that the majority of a lot of this would likely fall into some of those reserve buckets. One question came up that, and Arthur, I'm going to give you credit for this because it was a very brilliant email that was sent. In our ACFR, on the page where when they're talking through our general funds, it's page 27, and they're talking through our general funds, they actually noted, I believe it was page 27, deficiency in subsequent years.
Mhm.
And there's about $3 million there. Can you explain, because I think I remember what I heard them say in terms of explaining why we needed to make sure that we were accounting in that way. Can you just explain for the group what that bucket of money was for?
Yeah, this amount of about $3 million was actually transferred from the unassigned reserve to the committed reserve for the purpose that we want to cover the future expenditure of fiscal year 23, because the effort of page 27 is the closing book of fiscal year 22. And at that time, we already have the 23 budget adopted. And we knew that we had a deficit in fiscal year 23. So in order to set aside some money just to cover for the deficit situation that we have in fiscal year 23, we transferred that $3 million just in case to make sure that we don't overspend our entire unassigned reserve. Because if we didn't transfer that $3 million, our unassigned reserve would have been over $7 million. And it's very easy that we can overspend that money and then spend more than $4 million. So that's why we want to put aside this $3 million in the committed reserve, okay, to make sure that it can cover our deficit situation in fiscal year 23. So that is the purpose of it. It's not really, we want to take away the money from the unassigned for any purpose, but this bucket of money can be used even for the purpose of replenishing our ERR or replenishing our FMR. I'm sorry, I'm using the acronym. ERR is our Equipment Replacement Reserve, because we do know that in fiscal year 24, we have a lot of expenditures in the Equipment Replacement Reserve. So it can be used for other purposes to make sure that we have sufficient funding for the deficit situation in 23, or we can use it for other purpose, like to replenish the Equipment Replacement Reserve, because we have to make contributions to the reserve every single year to make sure that it is properly funded.
Yes. And thank you so much, because that's what I recall, because we had this tendency to kind of play a little bit of a game where we would budget and then we wouldn't be able to do certain things. And then we would get to the end of the fiscal year, and then we would have these dollars tied to those activities that would be left over. And those dollars would have to go into the unassigned reserve, but the activities and those expenditures, we rolled them over into the next budget.
Yes.
And so what would happen is the next budget would show a deficit, right? Because we have all these added activities that exceed our revenues. But we would have in our unassigned reserve the monies associated with those items. That's what I was trying to do. And so then what would happen is you could really mess around and make a mistake and think you have more unassigned reserves than you really do. And so if I remember correctly, they were saying, no, don't do that. if you are committing these reserves, don't lump them with your unassigned because they're committed. And so you need to make sure that if you're bringing those items over and you're gonna basically over budget, that you're keeping those dollars in a pot that you can draw from.
You segregate that.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
Thank
that's
you,
the
Mayor.
$3 million pot.
Yes,
that's what I was
exactly
gonna
right.
add to this conversation is that I do think that to some degree it would be a lot easier if we just said that there was some ideas and some activities that the council wanted to do, and they were more than what the initial revenue that came in from the expenditures were. And as a result, since we had money in the reserve that was available to augment that budget, that the council did so. And so when you say it's a deficit, it's technically a deficit, but it's not really a deficit because it is the planning of the council. And somewhere along the line, when we're talking about those things, if you get too caught up in the fact that it is a technical deficit, it doesn't necessarily indicate the fact that there could have been completely reasonable and rational economic decisions along the way with regard to either the previous budget or the reserves that make it look worse than it is if you aren't following or paying attention, or if someone like your finance director doesn't do an awesome looking thing like this one, because it's awesome looking.
May I follow up on that?
Sure.
Just real quickly, I think the other thing that when people hear deficit spending, they think often of the federal government, where deficit spending means that we're going out and borrowing money
I don't do
to
that
pay the
either.
bills, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about using money that we have in the bank.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yeah, two things. I guess I'm reminded that why it's important to have that 10-year forecast. We talked about trends here and looking at with save more or get more revenue. Those are the questions we got to ask, and we can, if we see the trends in the past, and I think you pointed out, Director Chung, that we're not moving in the right direction, at least as far as our unassigned reserves. So we have an opportunity to turn that around a little bit in this next budget cycle, and I'm hoping, at least from my point of view, I don't want to budget high and spend low. I want to budget realistically for what we can afford, live within our means. It sounds like that's not the way that the budgets were done in the past. I think that was that terminology you used, Mayor. I'd like to have a little bit closer to realistic projections of what we intend to spend and what we intend to earn in a given year.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept this resolution.
Well, this is actually this is a work session, so this item will come back before us next week for a vote. So are there any, Councilmember Gibson?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Councilmember Devala.
Yeah, I know this is about one budget amendment, but while we're on the subject, I do think it is important that we take a look even given the situation of an acting city manager and all the, putting us a little behind in preparing the budget and so forth. I do think it's important for this council to schedule some time to talk, at least in concept, about alternative revenue sources. And I have some ideas which I can share with you at some point, but I think that we need to do that.
Yeah.
Why am I looking at her when I should be looking at you? Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right. I think we're done. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Director Chung. Thank you so much, Acting City Manager Grisby. I really appreciate all of the hard work that you all put into this. And again, this will come back before council next week.
All right.
Thank you all
Thank
so,
you.
wonderful. All right, well, that's the last of our agenda. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.
Good night.